Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's finally here. Or at least it will be in 6 months. Or at least it will be for some people, because I can't get it. The Steam Deck is only shipping to North America, Europe, and the United Kingdom. Great. Thanks for ignoring Australia again, Valve, you dickhead. Never mind. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to talk to you for a bit about why the Steam Deck might be the greatest thing to happen to PC gaming in a very long time. For multiple reasons. But I will say a lot of this is conjecture, because again, the Steam Deck isn't ours at the time of this video. I'm mainly working off information that's been given to us that has previously existed in terms of just portable consoles that run on PCs, in terms of the interviews that have been given out to IGN as part of their reveal of the Steam Deck, and as just the official reveal like on Steam's website itself about what the Steam Deck will have, but everything that's here is incredibly exciting. And if I had the opportunity to buy this, I would have snapped a 512 gig model up as soon as it was available, because it's someone from the big leagues finally taking on the relatively niche at the moment portable PC market, and I just can't wait to see what comes out here, because this has the potential to change everything. This has the potential to change the way handheld consoles work. This has the potential to change gaming in general. And it's about time one of the big makers of games finally decided to jump on this industry. But nevertheless, let's just get to the reasons as to why. Now, I have owned other portable PC consoles before, and I have seen the potential, and I've enjoyed a lot of that potential, because I previously owned an Open Pandora, which was pretty good, and I have also owned a GPD Win 2, which was very good. I unfortunately can't use that one anymore because the battery on it's dead, and I need to keep it plugged in, otherwise the moment it tries to suck any power, it just dies. But the entire market has just been brimming with possibility for years. And I'm so happy that one of the major game companies has decided to go in on this concept, even to the point where it's kind of painful for them, as Gabe himself said when they were talking about the price of the lowest end Steam Deck model. But yes, everything after this point is conjecture, because again, we're just working with what's been released by people who have actually had hands-on with the Steam Deck, but nevertheless. A lot of people have said this thing not only looks bad, which is a lie, it looks great. It actually looks amazing. It's surprisingly slick, and it's got a really nice sort of feel going on about it. Like, I've got a entirely black Nintendo Switch, and it doesn't look too far off the Steam Deck. It really isn't that bad. It's actually relatively close together, just looking at the two somewhat closely. But anyway, I do like the way that it looks, but a lot of people have also been complaining about the way it might feel because of the position of the buttons, or of the joysticks, or of how big it is. And frankly, having played a lot of devices along these lines, I'm having trouble seeing the problem, because first thing we'll just start with is how big it's going to be. And I've got a Switch in my hand here, and it's only about 20% wider than a Switch, and the Switch isn't that bad. It really isn't. If anything, the Switch might be a little bit too thin for what it's trying to accomplish, so seeing this being able to not only expand out a little bit, but actually improve on the grips is really good, because if you look at your Switch, when it's got its Joy-Cons plugged in, it's got like just a rounded rectangle grip, and it's not great. It's better than just having a flat rectangle, but you can still kind of feel it pressing into your hands and all that. It's not too bad. You can definitely still hold it for a few hours at a time, but I'm just saying it's there. This looks like a much more natural hand grip, and I am much going to be more of a fan of this, because it's going to feel a bit more like a controller than a Nintendo Switch ever did, which is nice. The size does make it a bit of an unpocketable bastard, but at the same time, you were never able to pocket the original Switch anyway. Unless you had absolutely massive pockets. I'm a big guy. I've got big pockets, and even I couldn't fit the Switch fully, like, assembled into it. I had to take the Joy-Cons off and put them in a separate pocket, and even then I was worried that sitting down the wrong way would be enough to break the joysticks in this thing. So yeah, carrying this around in a pocket, not going to be possible, but it's not something that I would want to do with this sort of thing anyway. A few people are also complaining about how the controls look, like how the buttons look like they're about to fall off the sides of the poor thing. And technically this is true, but I don't see how this is going to be a major problem, because I'm holding my Switch right here, and I'm just putting my fingers where it looks like the buttons are going to be, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be a problem at all. It's just like a millimeter off or two off where the Joy-Cons would be. It looks more than comfortable enough. If anything, I'm more worried about the analog sticks, because they're a little bit further in than where they would be on any other controller I've ever used. It's probably not going to be too bad, judging by the videos that we got going on here. I'm assuming that Valve doesn't employ only people with massive hands, but yeah, that's what I'm more worried about. The joysticks themselves, though, a lot of people are going to be drawing inspiration from Joy-Cons and the DualSense, in that they're a little bit worried about how long these are going to last, but thankfully, Valve actually lets you control dead zones on joysticks, so this probably isn't going to be a problem. Because I've actually got a PlayStation Vita with a joystick on it that's kind of dying, but thanks to the fact that I can change the dead zone on that with a bit of homebrew going on in there, it means that I can continue to use the Vita and it's not going to be that big of a deal. I know that's not how things normally work, but considering that Nintendo, with a notable problem with its Joy-Cons, doesn't even let you do that, I just gotta say, man, it's obvious. It's obvious that it's something they should be doing, but Valve is probably just going to be able to take care of this right away. What's really going to be the big unknown is the touchpads, both of which are able to control mice, and I'm assuming you'll be able to remap them to do things like button presses if you do things like swipes and all that. We don't know how in-depth those touchpads are going to be, but I will say this. I owned a Steam controller at one point. I don't anymore, mainly because it was a massive pain in the ass to actually set up games to play it, but those actual touchpads, when you were using them for their intended purpose, which was mouse-like movement, was stellar. The surfaces had the best texture. It gave you just the right amount of feedback without feeling like you was holding back your thumb too far. It moved the mouse perfectly, and it was able to be really individually adjusted so that you could be as comfortable as you wanted to be. And with the functionality that they're showing off in these videos, where if you put your finger down on the touchpad, you can use it as a accelerometer aim, is really intriguing, because that means you can also do multiple other things with it. Like probably use it as like a swiping thing for a D-pad, or use it as a, use it in any other sort of amount of ways, because if you can do something like press down on it, or just hold your finger on it to activate a gyro sensor, who knows what else we'll be able to do with these things? And I'm really looking forward to being able to go through Steam Input and have a play around with them, because you never know exactly what these things will be capable of until you really get a feel on them. Analog triggers, absolutely great. Racing games are going to be an absolute blast on this thing. I can imagine people having a lot of fun with games like Wreckfest and Forza Horizon. And the bumpers on the back, gonna be a little bit weird to get used to, but I appreciate the grip on the controller, on the edges, because again, it's more like a natural controller, so you're not likely to hit those by accident. And considering that we're gonna be playing nothing but PC games on this thing, having more options for input is always gonna be welcome. I can imagine playing Doom Eternal on this thing and just be using those 4 buttons as just rebinds for the grenades, the melee, the big ass sword, what have you, and just pressing them in all at once. But yeah, it all looks like a really good stuff from the outside. And this is Valve we're talking about. The Steam controller was a good piece of hardware. It was a good controller, even if it was a massive pain in the ass to set up all the time. So I can't imagine that this is going to be that much of a screw up. But again, conjecture, we'll wait and see. But the really, and I mean the massively big thing about the Steam Deck is how open it is. Because not only do you get not only do you get Linux on it, so everyone can finally say they use Arch, but everyone can finally see what the benefits are of a gaming PC. For those sorts of people who'd only ever play on something like a Switch, but would never consider something like an actual PC, because they'll get SteamOS, which looks to be pretty compatible from the start, and hopefully they'll be able to get the anti-cheat sorted out before we end up seeing this thing released. Excuse me. But you'll be able to just put Windows on it. I like the fact that Valve will let you put Windows on this and use this for nothing but Xbox Game Pass games. You're probably not going to do that because that would be insane. But I really do appreciate that fact. Plus, it's running on Linux. So it's not only dedicated to being its own open thing, and they're actively saying, hey, we'll give you SteamOS to make your own Steam Deck or Steam Deck derivative if you want to major companies. Or they're going to be improving Proton for this. So not only will users of the Steam Deck hopefully get that benefit of being able to use things like Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye, but they'll also get things like, they'll also pass these benefits on to Linux users. So not only will they be benefiting the Steam Deck users, but Linux will be getting a bit of a boost too. So everyone who's running Linux is going to want a reason to support this. Not saying that they absolutely should, but I mean, Jesus, apparently, I haven't tried this myself, but Proton has done an absolute ton for the Linux gaming community, and to see something that's actively based on that, which might actually turn out to be pretty damn good, is really exciting. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of storage sizes on this thing, but this is probably because the GPT Win 3 just came out, and it has like a 2280 slot that's user replaceable, so you could easily fit like 2 terabytes into a GPT Win 3, which is smaller than the Steam Deck. But 64 gig, 256 and 512 isn't massively objective. I don't object to it, but at the same time, I'm definitely not going to be getting the 64 gig one. It's not the one I would recommend to anyone, just because, yeah, there are going to be some problems with speed on it. I will always tell someone to go for the 256, just because things like boot times are going to be way faster on an NVMe SSD like that one. The eMMC version is just going to be relatively slow when you do all that. It's not going to be massively slow, and when you're playing smaller games off it, like say you keep games like Darkest Dungeon, or Hollow Knight, or Dead Cells, or other things like that, you know, some relatively simple indie games that aren't too big on the file size, those will probably run absolutely fantastically off the internal memory. And considering that we're probably not going to have as massive of a size reducement, like SteamOS 3 is probably only going to be a couple of gigs. It's not going to be huge in comparison to like Windows 10. But yeah, you're going to need a good SD card to run major games off of. And I don't know what running Jedi Fallen Order off an SD card might look like, but I did run games off a GPT Win 2's SD card. I do have like a Windows tablet that I run games off of sometimes off the SD card, and those loading times can definitely cause some stutters in certain games. So that will definitely be something to be aware of, because it definitely can impact the loading times. But then again, at the same time, if you're willing to put up with that, and you only want to spend the $400 for a Steam Deck, and you want to pull like a 256 gigabyte micro SD card that you've been keeping around the place for it, you'll probably be okay. And we'll also probably be okay with SteamOS, because based off what they've shown us, it's actually looking relatively impressive, just because of how easy it looks like it's going to be to use SteamOS on this thing, because it just looks like a revamped big picture mode. And if you're just looking to buy games, download them, play them, and maybe even install mods through the Steam Workshop, it's probably just going to be really simple to do it all through the Steam Deck's interface. But if you want to go out to the desktop, you've got KDE Plasma, and I actually tried KDE Plasma in preparation for this video. I just went and downloaded like a live CD, and I just gave it a go, and it's really similar to Windows. It's got a lot of the same things going for it, a lot of the same visual design, very similar UI, and a bunch of the stuff that comes pre-installed, at least in something like Kubuntu, is something you're going to want to see pre-installed on something like a portable PC. So if you want to be doing something like some light office work, or maybe, I was going to say playing a couple of games there for a second, watching some YouTube stuff via just web browsing in general, it looks like it's not only going to be okay, but it looks like even people who are only used to Windows might actually be able to get used to this. Although it depends on whether or not they're going to let us use like the physical controls as like keyboard and mouse controls, because things like the GPD Win would let you do that, and it was actually relatively comfortable to use the GPD Win 2 that way. So it'll be interesting to see if they try and duplicate it, and in what ways they'll duplicate it. I mean, using that touchpad there would be an absolute step up, but I wonder what they'll do if you want to do things like caps lock or something like that. We'll find out, of course, but it looks like it's going to be relatively comfortable. As for how long it'll last, it's totally acceptable. A lot of people are saying that, hey, 2 hours isn't good enough. 2 hours is just ridiculous. But it took ages for people to get over that well, not even so much get over, but just kind of accept the truth that the Switch only ever lasted that long anyway. I mean, it does okay playing simpler games, but if you were trying to play Breath of the Wild, you'd be lucky if the thing lasted more than 2.5 hours. And it looks like it's going to do that PC thing where it'll downclock itself relatively effectively if you're playing a lighter game. So if you're just emulating NES ROMs or something like that, you'll probably get 6 or 7 hours out of this thing, which is not only to be expected, but it's about the same battery life you'd get out of a GPD Win 2 if you were doing the same thing. So that's good. Like, I don't have a problem with the amount of battery life they're touting for this one, and I just say they're doing a good enough job. And when you can get something like Portal 2 working for 4 hours at 30 FPS on maximum settings, I'll give you a thumbs up for that. That's entirely reasonable for a bloody PC that runs like that can be held in the palms of your hands. And of course, we have the game library because, yeah, the possibilities are endless. Because not only do we have a more natural way to control mouse-based games with these touchpads, we have what looks like a really good controller setup, and we have Proton. We didn't have Proton 6 years ago. If they were trying this 6 years ago, it probably would have tanked. But they put the time into Proton even after Steam machines failed, even with like a 3% market share at best of Linux on Steam. And that work is probably going to pay off with the Steam Deck, because the amount of games you're going to be able to play with it is going to be big enough for the majority of people to be convinced that this might actually be worth doing. Like, I was having a rumble around in comments on Reddit about this thing, and people were saying things like, I could play The Sims on the go with this. And other people were chiming in with, you can play the fucking Sims on this? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can play everything from Red Dead Redemption to The Sims to Ni no Kuni to Disco Elysium. And if there's something that doesn't work and you really want to play that, just get Windows on it. It probably won't be that hard to put Windows on it. I think they're still allowing like free installs for screens under a certain size, and I'm pretty sure that the deck falls in under that account. And even if it doesn't, it's not that hard to get a good copy of Windows 10 these days. And there'll probably be a guide to how to dual boot Windows and Linux on this thing, like the day it comes out, if not the day before. And then you'll be able to play everything. You might not get the cool-ass touchpad functionality without Steam input. You might not be able to get the gyro sensor or the back buttons, but I'm hoping that those touchpads will still work in Windows mode. And then we can tell them, hey, you can play anything. You want to download an obscure Game Maker game from 2005 and play that? Go ahead. You want to download The Sims from Origin and play that? Go ahead. You want to download some of the most obscure games you've ever heard of? Go ahead. You want to download Flashpoint? I'm not even going to try and explain how Flashpoint will work on this thing. Again, this would probably be something I would personally work on if I could get a Steam Deck, but I can't get a Steam Deck. But Flashpoint would work on this thing. I'd probably recommend that you get Windows and a Bluetooth mouse and keyboard, but it would absolutely work. And not to mention emulation. Emulation is going to be fucking massive on this thing. It's going to be huge because the GPD Win 3 has already been proven that it can run PlayStation 2 and GameCube games pretty much flawlessly. The very, very heavy titles like Black or, what's one on GameCube that I could say? I don't know off the top of my head, but some of the more heavier titles will probably still be a problem for the overall frame rate. But the absolute majority of those are going to work. And someone who sets up a way to get this all working on the Steam Deck with just like a one-click download. Like someone just downloads like a binary that unpacks PCSX2, Dolphin, BizHawk, and a few other things and puts them straight into the Steam Deck menu with some simple instructions on where to put games and how to load them up, it will be a killer portable 6th generation, sorry, I always get them mixed up. A 6th generation portable handheld machine. And for the price that it's going to be going at, it's basically blown the GPD Win 3, the Iron Neo, and the 1GX player out of the water. And it's looking like it's going to perform better than most of those. Thanks to the fact that it's on a higher end architecture, it's got faster RAM, and it's looking like it's just better in general. It's probably going to be an emulation monster. And there's no way around that. And it's probably going to be wonderful. And I want one. I want a Steam Deck so badly. If I could pay the $600 US right now, I probably would. I would scrounge that money together in a heartbeat to pay for this damn thing. Because it's going to blow all the other handheld consoles of this kind out of the water. And I really want it to light a fire under Nintendo's arse, because they have really been falling behind in the Switch department again. How long has it been since the Switch came out? It's been like 5 years at this point. It's about time they introduced a new Switch, and not just one with an OLED screen. Like, how long has it been since the damn thing came out? Hang on. It's been... Wow, it usually gives me a release date, like right here. 2017. So it's been 4 years. I apologize. But you'd think it'd be time for them to just give it a little bit of a performance upgrade to help all those games that were already struggling. To help just get some more games onto it. And not force them to be really poorly optimized or just not run great. But then Steam comes along and says, hey, for $50 more, you can access the entire PC game ecosystem. You can bring along all of the games that you previously owned on PC and play them on this, no questions asked, no charge. You can play them better than they've ever looked on a portable system. You can play them with these unique and, unique in form of the touchpads, and not so much unique, but still probably really comfortable things like the back triggers and just the general gyroscope of it, and the customizability of the entire thing so that you can remap anything to anything. The games are going to be really cheap. You've got absolute freedom on how you want to go about things in terms of buying docks, what operating system you want to use, what games you want to play on it. You're not going to be locked down to a particular region's store on one account, although with Steam that is kind of true. But yeah, that's always been a bit of a bitch. I've always wanted the Japanese versions of Super Robot Wars X and V, but you're not going to be locked down to one store. In fact, you can wipe everything Steam related off this thing and just play on the Epic Games Store if you want to. You can play any games that you want, and it's only going to cost you $50 more than a brand new Switch. Their screen may be nicer, but we've got it everywhere else that counts. And I want it. I want it so bad. It's just, even from what they've been saying about it publicly, it looks like they've done literally everything right. It looks like they've done everything that we could have possibly asked for when it comes to a portable PC gaming system. And I can't bloody wait. I will be watching every little bit of coverage I can. I will be waiting for the email to say you may now preserve your Steam Deck in Australia, because I so want to put this thing through its paces. I want to play everything I can on it. I want to see what'll work and what won't. Every time I get a new system like this, my first thought is to tinker the fuck out of it. And that's something I wanted to do desperately with a Steam Deck. I want to know what it can and can't do. And that's usually a really good sign for these sorts of handheld systems, because with how much this thing can do, it's hard to imagine what it can't do. And again, well, I'll go over the obvious downsides. It's Valve. They have a tendency to quote-unquote abandon products, but only on the hardware side of things. They don't make Steam controllers or Steam Links anymore, but they're constantly updating the software for them. Steam Input is constantly updated to keep them up with all the other input systems of other controllers so that you can still play around with that. The Steam Link still gets firmware updates all the time. The Valve Index is still getting made, but very slowly, and it's a very niche product, so that's kind of understandable, although it'd be nice if you didn't need to RMA stuff related to the Valve Index so often. And it is a bit of a worry that they'll decide to just drop support for this thing within a year. But even then, that's not the worst thing in the world. Just because, if you put Windows on it, it's still a handheld PC that can run Windows. It'll work as long as the hardware on the inside keeps working. And I can understand why it might be a bit of a put-off not to be in like the first wave. You don't want to be in that, let everybody else sort out the hardware deficits for you before you end up getting the second set of them in Q2 or Q3 of next year. And that's fine. But I just wish I could be a first adopter for this. Absolute bloody shame. But yeah, that's it. That's all I've got. I know I've just spent like the last 26 minutes endlessly praising the Steam Deck, but everything looks good. This is launch conditions are go for a launch to the moon. I cannot wait to see what comes of the Steam Deck. And for the future of not only Linux gaming, not only PC gaming, and not only handheld gaming, but for all gaming in general. Because if this concept takes off and people like like Microsoft decide to enter the handheld market with something like this for like their Game Pass titles, that'll really set the handheld scene on fire again. That'll really change up the way developers develop games again. That'll change everything. And I'm really looking forward to seeing if this will change everything. Or if it'll just be another neat product. We'll see in about 6 months. With that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.